Hey travelers, welcome back to The Rift here on Ghostlight. Monday's video, episode 1 of The Rift, was pretty well received, so I'm going to keep these rolling, and it's a good thing too, because I'm excited about this next topic. It's one that's very prevalent in the comments so far, and that topic is, are Light No Fire and No Man's Sky connected in any way? Now, during the course of this video, I really want to address 3 different questions. The first being, what are the similarities between these games? Next, what are the lore-based ways that these games can be related to one another? And then finally, should these games be related to one another? Should there be a connection between Light No Fire and No Man's Sky? Does that serve the community, and does that serve Hello Games? So, let's dive in. What are the similarities between these games? Well, to start, we can see in the trailer, specifically pointed out, that this will be a procedurally generated Earth. Well, procedural generation, sometimes referred to as progen, is simply the algorithmic technology used by Hello Games to generate No Man's Sky. When you visit a planet or a system in No Man's Sky, it's not something that Hello Games has modeled specifically. It's the result of several variables or inputs created by Hello Games that become randomized upon generation, but nothing is generated until a user enters the system and observes them or discovers them. This kind of mimics like quantum entanglement, where all possibilities exist until observed. The same thing holds true of No Man's Sky. Any undiscovered system holds the potential of all the variables listed in the game until it's observed and those variables become settled or decided upon. Now, when I call this technology algorithmic, it's due to a super formula that Sean Murray himself has referenced in the past. This formula helps with the generation of patterns, and it was developed by Johan Gillis, who worked for a company called Genicap. Now, Genicap owned the patent for this technology or this formula up until about May of 2020. Now, I haven't been able to find anything online that shows that they currently hold the patent, which may be important to Hello Games. Now, this method of generating in-game content makes it possible for the supposed 18 quintillion planets there are between the 255 or 256 galaxies in No Man's Sky. But apply that same method to just one planet. One very large planet, like an Earth-sized planet. But any undiscovered parts of that planet haven't yet been generated, so the terrain is up for grabs, so are the features and supposedly the locations of interest. Now, the press release for Light No Fire, which you can find on their website, says something along the lines of strike out on your own and discover the world for others. And I really think this is what that's pointing to, is that you can go into undiscovered sections of the world, have it be generated and decided upon, and then others can visit it, much in the same way that the planets generate in No Man's Sky. You find a planet, you can post the glyphs, other people can visit that planet and experience it as you experience it. There's also a lot of questions on whether or not Light No Fire will have features like server meshing or persistent streaming. And both of these new technologies contribute to the idea of more people interacting over a much larger virtual space. And we don't really know any information on this. A lot of that speculation arose from one of the lines in the press release that talked about persistent builds. But I digress. Where were we? Oh yeah, similarities between Light No Fire and No Man's Sky. Probably the most prevalent similarity that anyone noticed was the big red orb. That is the glowing red sphere floating atop a torch at the end of the Light No Fire trailer, and the big red orb that we've all come to attribute to the Atlas in No Man's Sky. Now, they are similar in shape and color, however, their material seems different. The orb in Light No Fire appears to be more of a crystal ball or a container holding some sort of mystical energy, maybe a star, whereas the Atlas sphere is a liquid, mercury-type metal that just flows over the surface of its geometry. Now, both of these spheres appear central to the story of either game, and they both appear on the logo for each of the games as well. Now, we don't really know enough about Light No Fire to make any story-based or lore-based connections with No Man's Sky, but it's hard to ignore the imagery. And that's true for a lot of the similarities that are on my list. When we look at the flora design, is very similar to some of the No Man's Sky assets. When we go back to the Titan Gatekeeper we see here, the symbol on its face is very reminiscent of the Knowledge Stones in No Man's Sky. Now, if you look here, you'll see this stone sphere. Some have pointed out that this looks suspiciously similar to the structure of the space anomaly, even speculating that perhaps they had a similar creator. But we learned through the main storyline that Nada and Polo were actually the creators of the space anomaly. So if that were true, this would have to be either a distant future or just another alternate reality. And continuing with that theme, the underwater environment here looks very similar to No Man's Sky, but with greater detail. You can see how these schools of fish are grouped very similarly to No Man's Sky. Some of the swimming animations are the same as well. And it's tempting to point at these visual similarities and say, yes, Light No Fire is connected to No Man's Sky for these reasons. But a more likely explanation might just be that Hello Games has the same design team working on both projects. Now, many have pointed to the work of Bo Lamb. Bo is a digital artist, very talented. He's also listed as a junior artist at Hello Games. Bo has done some work for Hello Games on No Man's Sky, and it's speculated that he's working on Light No Fire as well, as many of the images that he's posted recently seem to have served as inspiration for some of the in-game assets we saw in the Light No Fire trailer. Now, you can page through this account, you can go back pretty far. A lot of his designs kind of blur the edge between sci-fi and fantasy, and I think this is actually a distinction that Hello Games is trying to keep with. No Man's Sky is sci-fi, Light No Fire is fantasy, two different IPs serving two different purposes. Now, some of the other similarities we see are more focused on game mechanics. Now, remember, both are survival, sandbox, exploration games. So base building, resource gathering, both are prominent in each title. We have mounts in Light No Fire, which seem to be analogs to the exocraft and the starships of No Man's Sky. Now, some have even pointed to the player movement in the trailer for Light No Fire. Feels a little bit scripted, a little too coordinated. And to be honest, this seems pretty common when it comes to trailers coming out of Hello Games. We often see this type of thing with No Man's Sky update trailers. It feels just a little too coordinated to be true to life. This isn't a big deal for me, but some people are saying it's not truly indicative of what the gameplay is like. So, take that as you will. So, just to summarize, what are the similarities between these two games? Well, both Light No Fire and No Man's Sky are procedurally generated, and that's likely due to the studio that's giving us both IPs. There's some visual similarities that may be intentional. It may be trying to tell us the story. It also may be a symptom of having the same design team working on both projects. And finally, there's some game mechanics that are similar as well. And likely this is due to the genre that these both occupy, the sandbox survival/exploration genre. I think that we can all agree that Light No Fire is certainly a spiritual successor to No Man's Sky, though it may be a little too early to tell if it's an actual sequel or prequel to the game itself. Unfortunately, we don't really know enough about Light No Fire to draw any direct lines from the stories of both games. We don't have any story at all for Light No Fire. But we know quite a bit about No Man's Sky's story, and we can draw some conclusions based on the lore. Now, if you're unfamiliar, there's a link above. You can go to my lore series. It breaks down in depth all of the No Man's Sky story, save a few details. But looking at the lore, what are some ways that these two titles could be connected? Well, I've seen several theories in the comments to some of the videos, but let's go over a few. So this first theory comes to us from user Tater Sandwich. Well, Tater thinks that the solution lies in the Prime Terminal, or Terminal Prime. Now, this is not a simulation that they keep in the back room of the anomaly. It's listed as Minor Simulation 5 after we put Artemis into it. Then later, once we upload the sentient echoes during the course of the Singularity expedition, it's listed as Simulation 19. Fitting. Now it appears that this terminal is capable of running multiple simulations at once, and some have speculated that one of those simulations may very well be Light No Fire. Well, it's not a bad theory. Now a couple of thoughts. If that were true, then Light No Fire would still be subject to the limitations of the Atlas and its rampancy as we plunge towards that 16th minute. But honestly, who knows where we'll be within the No Man's Sky story when Light No Fire finally releases. Another vulnerability in this theory is that the several races that appear in the Light No Fire trailer. Now, the boundary failure terminals taught us that there used to be many more races, much more variation to civilized space in No Man's Sky. But with the Atlas's degradation, eventually it caused itself to repeat itself so that we only have the same 3 or 4 main races that appear: the Korvax, the Vy'keen, the Gek, and now the Autophage, who are arguably just Korvax, but that's a topic for another video. So where did these very Earth-like races come from? Well, dear interlopers, theorycraft in the comments below. Now this next theory comes from friend of the channel and YouTube member, Raging Furball. Now, thanks to the events of Waking Titan and the rogue data found in the Remembrance terminals, we know that the Atlas was developed on our Earth in 2014 and was left behind when humanity fled Earth, as the Atlas predicted its destruction. We also know that the Atlas helped its creators create its successor, an AI that was more mobile and would travel with humanity as they search for their next home. Now, Furball's theory suggests that perhaps it's within this new AI simulation that Light No Fire occurs. And yeah, I really can't find any flaws in that. It would explain why there's Earth-like fauna that appear and the links to fantasy genre that existed on Earth. This theory is sound, but what do you think? Can you find any flaws? And finally, the world of glass, freed by the Atlantid. Now, this is a theory I posted to Twitter last week that may be an explanation that bridges the gap between the games. And for those who don't know, the Sentinels, or the Aeron race, weren't always the mechanized drones Rift walking through the systems that we know today. They started out as a maintenance protocol for the Atlas. That is, until the Atlas started to break down and deviate from its directive. And that's really where things get interesting. Now, all of this can be found in the Sentinel Pillar lore, but I wanted to point to the 5th encounter specifically. Now, the Sentinels had been recording and deleting data for the Atlas from the beginning, but it wasn't until the 16 minutes started that the Atlas gave them form and turned their archive into the world of glass. That encounter reads, "The Atlas dreamt that we had form, and thus we had form. The Atlas dreamt we had a home, so an archive became a universe. Our depository of accumulated data became a heaven and a hell. If you could live there, you would see only light. You would see only glass." Now, all of that to say that all of the other races that existed before the rampancy, as I mentioned earlier, the variety of life that existed outside of the 3 or 4 that we know today, they all still exist in the archive that turned into the world of glass. For those of you who have been following the story of No Man's Sky, you know that we're currently dealing with the Atlantid, or the Void Mother, who is exerting increasing control over the simulation, who is obsessed with getting past the 16th minute into the 19th minute, and who very much believes that life does not end because the data remains. Now, it's very possible that, however this story plays out, the Atlantid is successful in getting us to the 19th minute, and she may free all of these archived beings in the world of glass. After all, we have seen signs that she's conspiring with the family of glass and with the Sentinels who watch over that realm. So that's it. The Atlantid gets her way, and Light No Fire could be a subsequent simulation of the Void Mother, separate from our main No Man's Sky continuity, but still related. Now, these are just a few theories. Let me know what you think the connection might be. Alright, let's finish strong. Finally, should these two titles be related? And again, this is just my humble opinion, but no, I don't. I honestly believe that Hello Games wants both of these games to run concurrently and independent of one another. The continued success of No Man's Sky protects Hello Games from any risk they assume from a new title being released, as I discussed in the last episode. Though clearly this is a spiritual successor to No Man's Sky, making it a direct prequel or sequel would pull attention away from the original game. Remember, replayability has been the bread and butter of Hello Games up to this point, and generally releasing a sequel almost immediately squashes the replay value of the predecessor game. Now, I think that Hello Game wants player crossover from both titles for sure, and setting up one as sci-fi and the other as fantasy is an attempt to scratch two different itches within the same player base, despite both being sandbox survival/exploration games. Now, I can honestly say, personally, the excitement I feel over Light No Fire is similar to how I feel about No Man's Sky, but it's set to satisfy something else, something that No Man's Sky lacks. I want to live in both worlds, and I hope the community that we've built over on Discord will also cross over and we can pick and choose which title we're playing from one day to the next. By the way, you want to join our Discord? Go to ghostlightxc.com. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you think these two titles should be connected, or if you plan to play both games. And that's it for this episode of The Rift at Ghostlight XC. I hope you enjoyed this video/podcast. Please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. And as always, dear Rift Walkers, I'll see you tonight.